Welcome to NeverTheLess podcast with Bidemi Mark-Mordi, a show dedicated to organic leaders and leaderpreneurs. Today, you would learn how to discover your essence and live more powerfully.
Hello and welcome. This is NeverTheLess, a show for organic leaders and leaderpreneurs. My name is Bidemi Mark-Mordi. In this month, we've been in the series, Heroism, and our focus really is in growing reluctant heroes. And so today we want to look at Gideon, the reluctant hero. But before we get into today's episode, I want to take us through a summarization or a roundup of last week's episode. Last week's episode, we looked at the three archetypes of heroes. We looked at the passive hero, we looked at the active hero, and we looked at the reluctant hero. And in looking at those three types of people, we said that if we had to choose to be heroes, you think that it seems like the reluctant hero is the most effective kind of hero. And today, as we look at Gideon, our reluctant hero, perhaps I'll be able to draw out things for you that want to make you understand that just because you are ordinary does not mean, number one, that you cannot be extraordinary in the moment. But more importantly, to help you see that all of us can contribute something, and that it's okay to be a hero when we are required and just be ordinary when we are not. To be able to step away from that room of heroism and not feel like, we are making a mistake. Do not have to lug around with us the burden of proving every single moment of the day that we are heroes. I took a look at the Bible, and my greatest example for me, or the most, example that we could use is the man Gideon. The account of Gideon is found in the book of Judges. In the book of Judges, Gideon was from the tribe of Benjamin. And in the tribe of Benjamin, according to what Gideon said himself, his family was one of the smallest. Gideon and the people of Israel were thrust in that place where an enemy nation was trying to overrun them. And this enemy nation had a modus operandi that what they did was when the Israelites would sow or they would plant their farms, these people will come and they will wait for the crop to have grown close to harvesting, and they will come and they will destroy. They were trying to plunge them into artificial famine so that they can become their slaves. This wasn't a war where they were waging to kill people, but it was a war that they wanted to cripple their economy. It was economic warfare. They wanted to cripple their economy so that Israel would perhaps go and willingly submit to them. And when the account opens, Gideon was found in a cave, and the Bible said he was threshing wheat. Now, I don't know if you know how wheat is threshed, but nobody threshes wheat in a cave, because to thresh wheat properly, you need wind or air. Yes, wind, because when you thresh wheat, you willow. And when you winnow, the idea is that the breeze or the wind will blow out the chaff so that the grain will remain. But Gideon was in the grave and he was threshing wheat when the angel of God showed up. The angel of God showed up to Gideon and he addressed Gideon as a man of valor. What makes a man threshing wheat in the cave a man of valor? Gideon asked. Gideon was taken aback by the introduction to himself. He said to the angel, "I think you have the wrong guy." And that started a conversation where Gideon had to ask questions and set fleeces just so he's sure that the angel has the right person. It turned out the angel had the right person, and God was interested in sending Gideon out to go and be the hero of his people. Gideon has never fought before, but he's been thrust in the eye of the storm. God was counting on him, and that meant that his entire nation's faith was in his hand. Would Gideon arise to this challenge, or will he chicken out? That's the point of reluctant heroism. I had said to us before when I was defining who a reluctant hero was, that reluctant heroes don't see the need to fight, but they are willing to fight, especially if it would bring succor to someone else. So Gideon had already surrendered to his fate, that he came from a small tribe and his family was the smallest and he was inconsequential, and he was willing to live his life like that every day. But when the angel showed up and said to him, "You have it in you to step up and fight for your people," Gideon stood up. But what I found is that Gideon did not immediately rush off to battle. He didn't send a message to the enemy nation to say, "You need to come because it is time for me to show you what stuff I'm made of." Gideon started gradually. He started with going at night to break down the altars of Baal around their worship centers. And, woke up in the dead of night with his friends to do that. When others woke up the next day and started to ask Gideon, who did this? Gideon did not even own up. It took a few people to say, "Oh, Gideon was the one." And in that time, Gideon was probably trying to grow his confidence to be able to step up and be who God has called him to do. Reluctant heroes don't push themselves to the forefront. They don't insist that they have to fight. As far as I'm concerned, what I know is that reluctant heroes only get into that place when all other means have been exhausted. So when Gideon showed up eventually and God said to him, "You have to go to battle against Amalek," Gideon was ready. He was ready not because he had strength, but because all the things that he had to do to prepare have now brought him to a place where he had an understanding that on the inside of him, he had the capacity. And what he required was the opportunity which had not presented itself. And he needed the courage to step up so that he could do what he believed that heaven was trusting him to do. Gideon got up and decided to gather men to go with him to war. The Bible said he gathered 30,000 men. This was not nearly enough to face an army that was coming with over 140,000 men. And yet, because the hero is the hero, even if he's reluctant, God said to him, "You don't need this many men." And ultimately, God watered that number and whittled it to 300 men. Gideon went to war with 300 men, and guess what? He didn't even need to fight in that war. That battle was totally fought and won by God by himself. The point I'm making is that reluctant heroes are men and women like Gideon who have no designs. They are not exactly ambitious every day. What they want out of life is to be able to make a contribution. And as long as they have been, They have been convinced that they have what it takes and that they are being relied upon to make the contribution, they step up to the plate. Gideon wasn't even willing. He wasn't sure that they could fight this fight and win it. I remember that someone had a dream. And in that dream, a friend of his said to him, "Let's go to the camp of the enemy and see what's happening there." And when they got there, God had set it up in such a way that one of the enemy commanders had a dream. And in that dream, he had seen that they had fallen to the sword of Gideon. God is looking for men and women who he has given the capacity to get to step up to the plate and do the things that they need to do. But they know that they don't have anything to prove, and they only go where God is called them to go. Gideon went into this place and he realized that from the beginning to the end, he wasn't the one fighting the battle. God just needed a man. Reluctant heroes are men who recognize that God needs a man, and they show up. They don't show up because 100% they are assured that they have the capacity to do what it is that they need to do. But they show up in confidence and they trust that God will take them through and bring them where they need to go. Gideon went on to be one of the most effective judges in the history of Israel. From a man who was threshing wheat in a cave to the man who could discomfit an army leading 300 men. And guess what? None of those 300 men had to fight. Why should this make sense to you? Or why should this be interesting to you? It should be interesting to you because you and me are men and women like Gideon. We may have capacity, but what God is looking for is availability. We may have capacity, but what God really wants is for us to show up. Today in your neighborhood, there are young men that are towing the path of destruction. And they don't need someone who is a professor. They don't need someone who is an army general. They just need a big brother figure who will show up and listen to them and let them know that he's invested in their lives. And that may be all that is required to turn the lives of these people around. The point I'm making is Gideon became a hero, even though he didn't set out to be one. And there are many of us today who, even though we have not set out to become heroes, will we allow God to grow us into our heroic activity so that we can be people that he can trust to lead and to bring other men to him? Whether you're running a business or you are in a not-for-profit, what is the good that what you're doing is doing that you don't necessarily have to be commended for? Gideon wasn't looking for commendation. I think that's why it was so easy for God to walk through him. If you compare him to Samson, and maybe in the next episode we'll look at some so-called heroes and so-called heroes in the Bible, what you will find is that Samson wanted to take the glory every time. And even though people say Samson did well, I think that he didn't need to die the way he died. But I digress because our focus is on Gideon. I'm about to go on a break now, and when I come back, I want to show you the things that I saw in Gideon's life that make for a reluctant hero. Please don't go away. This is the NeverTheLess show, and my name is Bidemi Mark-Mordi. God bless you.
In a world filled with many fears and discouragement, life often becomes a burden. For those who know the way, life is just simple. Do not worry, you're not alone on this life's journey, as Bidemi Mark-Mordi shares powerful insights and principles from her everyday work and life experiences in her book, NeverTheLess. NeverTheLess is a book designed to encourage and equip you to face life with courage, hope, and determination. Get a copy of NeverTheLess and other books written by Bidemi Mark-Mordi, like The Wisdom of the Seed, Honor, The Theology of Work, and so much more from a bookstore nearby, or call 080-905-63555 or send an email to bidemi@bidemimarkmordi.com to place your order. I guarantee you will make it. NeverTheLess.
Welcome back. This is still the NeverTheLess show. And today in this episode, we're looking at Gideon, the reluctant hero. As I prepared for this episode and I continued to just review the account of Gideon's life, I saw that reluctant heroism can do a ton of good. People who are not exactly looking for someone to call them a hero, but they are willing to do good work. That's in my book, is a reluctant hero. Now, before we went on the break, I did say that when we come back, I was going to be showing you some things that I have learned just reviewing Gideon's life. The first thing is that reluctant heroes, 80% of the time, their attention is gotten by tough times. There has to be something that is out of sync for a reluctant hero to step up. He might be ready, he might have prepared, but he waits and he waits and he waits. When someone needs someone, reluctant heroes are the ones that step up. So tough times get the attention of reluctant heroes. The reason is because they live their lives to make life better for others. And so when there is an adverse situation in the midst, they show up and they do their best work. They may not have been jostling for the work, but they get it done. The second thing that I learned out of Gideon's life is that God's plan is bigger than our plans. For those active heroes who always orchestrate heroism, This is one thing you may be able to learn from here, that God's plans are bigger than our plans. And if we agree that God is the one that deploys us and his plans are bigger than our plans, it's amazing how far will we go if we let God be the one that leads us. God's plans are bigger than our plans. Gideon understood this, and even when he didn't know and he was in the cave threshing wheat, the moment the angel showed up and he saw that God had something grander than the level and scale at which he was living his life, he stepped up to the plate. The third thing that I saw out of Gideon's life is that reluctant heroism allows us to let God confirm his priority by his presence, to confirm his priority by his showing up. You know, a reluctant hero, like I said, is an ordinary man doing ordinary things every ordinary day, until God takes a hold of him. And by that manifestation of God's hold on him, he recognizes that, oh, this is a priority for God. And 80% of the time, how God does this in our day is to take a hold of our hearts and just put an undying passion in us for a certain thing. And if we continue to pursue that thing, even just to learn it for ourselves, we always end up in a place where we can serve others with it. So God confirms his priority by his presence in the life of a reluctant hero. Something else that I saw that I want to highlight today for you is that private victories are the bedrock of public ones. Because reluctant heroes don't exactly care for the applause of men and the accolades of men, but they live their life right, even if they live it just for themselves. That is the bedrock upon which God builds and brings them into public spaces, and then they become the exponents of public victories. What is deadly with being an active hero 80% of the time is that active heroes usually don't have a lot of private victories. Everything for them is the flash and the dash. And because everything for them is the flash and the dash, they find themselves quickly falling flat on their faces when their character is tested. The bedrock upon which God builds a reluctant hero is his character. And the victory of character is won in private battles. The next thing I want to highlight is that if you're called to be a reluctant hero, or the grace of reluctant heroism is on you, there is no rush. It doesn't matter how long it takes. In this place, I would like to highlight for you the man Moses. When Moses first stepped out, he stepped out as an active hero, but that sent him into the back of the desert, where he spent another about 45 years just being Moses, just tending the flock. And in that time, character was built in him to the extent that when God came back for him to take him to Egypt to be the liberator of the people of Israel from Egypt, he was now very reluctant to go. And the reason is because there is a process that takes every reluctant hero to effectiveness. And so if you have been following this series and you're saying, perhaps I'm a reluctant hero, the one trait that you will see is how you are being processed. What have you been processed through? What are you learning consistently that is packing up your arsenal so that when the day comes, you are able to do what God is calling you to do? There was something else I saw in Gideon's life, is that we are always equipped before time begun. Every one of us has the seed of heroism in us. It's okay that you are reluctant, but as long as you process and you develop whatever your seed looks like, when the day comes, where you show up is where you are supposed to manifest. What I have found out is that God did not call Gideon to go and do Samson's work. Neither did he call Samson to go and do Moses' work. Everyone's work was what they ended up doing. And it all had to do with a part of God that he put on the inside of us. So there is no hurry. Even if you've been building yourself for years and you're beginning to feel like a day will never come for me to showcase what God has put on the inside of me, I promise you that day is coming. The day when you will be required and in need will show up. And when that day shows up, you'll be amazed how far you will go. Finally, this is not a trait, but it is the key to excelling as a reluctant hero. The key to excelling as a reluctant hero is that each one of us must have a devoted life to God and a life that is surrendered as well. Some people can be devoted and not surrendered, but it takes both the devotion and the surrender to be an effective reluctant hero. The point in all of this from today's episode is that there are many more heroes out there, but we don't see them because they are reluctant. There are many more heroes out there, and we don't know they exist yet because they're still in preparation. There are many more heroes out there, and the reason we don't call them heroes because they are not jostling to be in front. Reluctant heroes can do their thing from behind, from the middle, of wherever God would lead them to. The next time you travel, maybe on a train, a bus, or a plane, just take a look at the person next to you. That may be the hero that you need for that day. Who would have thought that Todd would be the person that would insist that that plane doesn't crash into the World Trade Center? Who would have thought that in that time when he gave up his life, that he would save lots and lots of people? The point today is that heroes are made by ordinary things. Heroes are people who are just ordinary people. His name was Todd Beamer. Todd Beamer. And his wife's name, I believe, was Lisa Beamer. She did the book, and you may want to check the book out. But he was an ordinary man who God took to do an extraordinary thing. Every single day, as a parent, you are raising heroes. Every single day, as a teacher, you are raising heroes. Every single day, as a pastor, you are raising heroes. Every single day, wherever you play, the people you are in contact with, you are raising heroes. They may not look like them, they may not act like them, but if you do your work, because you are a hero too, if you do your work well, on the day of manifestation, you'll be amazed what happens when these people are called and put on display. Till next week, when I'll bring you another episode on reluctant heroism, please remember, if you embrace your superpower, you will live powerful lives. But there is no hurry and there is no need to scream so that people would see you. When the day comes for your manifestation, the God of heaven himself will conscript you into the journey. Thank you. My name is Bidemi Mark-Mordi, and next week I'll see you on another episode of the NeverTheLess show. God bless you and bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to NeverTheLess. For more information and resources, call 080-90563-555 or send an email to bidemi@bidemimarkmordi.com. Don't forget, discovering your purpose helps you live more powerfully.